Michael. Councillor Thompson. 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 I just like to have everyone here. Okay. All right, Mr. Clerk, time is 7 o'clock on September 22nd, 2015. I'd like to call the General Committee meeting to order. I'm going by his time. Start off, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Could I get a motion to approve the agenda? Moved by Councillor Humphreys, seconded by Councillor Kim. Any comments or questions on the agenda? Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Were we given an additional item? Is it as amended?
That's for the special council meeting.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. All right. Move on to determination of items requiring separate discussion. I will start to my left. Councillor Peary.
5 and 10, please.
5 and 10. 5 and 10? 5 and 10? Councillor Kim.
Item 3.
Councillor Tom.
Item 4 and item 17.
Councillor Humphreys.
Item 14 and 15.
Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 6, please. I'm just looking for the pending list, Mr. Chair.
That I believe is number 9.
Number 9, please.
Okay. Councillor Thompson.
Item 1.
And Mayor Daw.
I'm covered.
Covered? Can I pull? I can pull something, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I'll pull number 2. Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10, 14, 15, 17. Okay. Okay. That's a good start. Yeah. Okay, so I'll may I have a motion to adopt items not requiring separate discussion? Moved by Councillor Perry, seconded by Mayor Daw. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Delegations. We have one delegation tonight. Mr. Gary Templeton, representing owner of 32 Wellington Street East, regarding item 17. Well, Mr. Templeton.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of committee.
You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'm here regarding item 17, which is 32 Wellington East. What remains of the building in terms of that site plan that is to be developed for an apartment building. We've been to Heritage Committee twice, and there have been 2 structural engineering reports prepared with regard to what remains of the building fronting onto Wellington. The engineering firm Socia Engineering were retained by the owners of 32 Wellington East, and then the town commissioned AMR Engineering to prepare a peer review structural engineering report, and the fees for both are being paid for by the owner of 32. Both reports agreed, and I'll just read you an extract from the one prepared by AMR, which was the town's engineering consultant. Summarizing it, would be prudent to remove the entire structure and reconstruct with proper damp proofing and in accordance with the Ontario Building Code. The owners have spent upwards of $100,000 on underpinnings, steel structure, and shoring to try to save that front part of the building so that it could be incorporated into the new structure to the rear back to Center Street. And in the AMR report, I don't know if that's in front of you, but you would see in there the evidence of the steel beam, concrete work, and underpinnings and shoring that's been applied, and notwithstanding that expenditure, again, upwards of $100,000, the building, it's the engineer's opinion, it's prudent to remove it and rebuild it with new construction. In other words, the owners have put substantial effort into saving the front portion of that building, as was intended by the agreement that's now signed between the owners and the town. They did not start out with an intention to remove that building. Quite the opposite. The intention was to preserve it. There's a recommendation in front of you from the Heritage Committee that we hope you'll approve for the removal of that so that it can be rebuilt. There is a condition there that is primarily why I'm here this evening, and that's the condition that the owner provides a $30,000 financial contribution to the Town of Aurora's Heritage Reserve Fund. That seems to me and to my client to be a punishment. In effect, it's a penalty, and in view of the actions by the owners in trying to preserve this, I don't think that's warranted to be applied in this case. They've made every effort. They've spent substantial funds to try to preserve the building, and it just doesn't seem fair for a penalty to be applied in these circumstances. Essentially, that's what I have to say, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you listening.
Thank you. May I have a motion to receive the delegation? And to refer. Mayor Dodd, seconded by Councillor Humphreys. Any questions or comments for the delegate? Councillor Humphreys? Sorry. Councillor Abel next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming this evening, and I appreciate your explanation. And I was on the Heritage Committee with Councillor Abel when they came forward, and we're really excited about the build there. I think it's going to look fantastic in that area. We're excited about it. Obviously disappointed. No one intentionally allowed this to happen. But just a question, and I'm not sure if you can answer this, but how did it happen so far in the process? I was, there's a little bit of residents' disappointment. Thank you very much that you're going to rebuild to look like it. So everyone's thankful for that, and I thank the builder for doing that because it means a lot to the town. But any idea how this happens, or is this a common thing that you see sometimes when you're doing underpinning and suddenly you can't salvage the building? It's just a sad...
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not, of course, the expert in the structural aspects by any means. But when I read the reports, it seemed that a lot of opinion was based on the condition of the bricks and the fact that they are not, in I guess, over the area of those bricks. In a lot of cases, they aren't properly tied in to the structure. And to get, I guess must be well nigh impossible to effectively put brick ties in between an existing structure and the brick facade. There was mention of that in both reports, and notwithstanding the structural effort that was made basically from the foundation up, there's still that problem with the brick. And in some cases, I think the observation was made that the brick was out of plumb, was basically coming away from the structure wall. That's, I guess as much as I can shed on that in terms of light.
Thank you. Thank you. Just one other, thank you very much. And just in terms of the $30,000, I know it seems like a punishment, and we'll get to that when we talk to the item, but I believe it's a sort of a a normal thing that happens in terms of supporting heritage in town, but we will discuss it, and I understand the money that was put in, the investment to try to save the building. So that's fair, and we'll talk about that later. Just one last question. Once this moves forward this evening, when do we feel when do you feel that the building will start being developed or built? Because I think people are anxious to see that developed there.
And I think everybody shares that view of getting on with it. We're finishing up a couple of issues that arose this summer. And it just seems like this little project has been fraught with all kinds of issues. There was an issue in the spring about the easements, mutual easements, that were put in place by the former owner when the property was sort of under one ownership but still separate title with 34 Wellington. So there were those mutual easements, and then legal wrangling broke out as to how to deal with those easements. And one school of thought was that we should remove the easements. We can't. We have no leverage with that owner at 34 to get those easements off. Then we had an issue arise with the region at the end of July, basically. And the region decided that it wanted a 3-meter widening. And that's at the end of the process. And I mean, I certainly, in my own case, I found that very frustrating to deal with something like that when we've been through the process with you guys for several years, and we've got a landscaping plan with considerable detail and so forth in the front yard, and then the region comes along, and the region's first position was, well, we want that clear of anything. We don't. And then they said they'd allow an encroachment agreement, and the owner wasn't very happy about it. They didn't want to acquire the land, but they wanted to register something on title. The owners weren't happy about that, belated as it was, because it puts a cloud on title. We're still sorting that out. And we'll have to see where that goes. But it's actively being dealt with both at the region and by the owners. And then, of course, is this heritage matter, which we hope can be cleared up this evening. We also learned recently that we had to have a record of site condition, an RSC, and that requires a Phase 1 ESA, Environmental Site Assessment. We did a Phase 1 ESA to get the zoning approved, but it's 2 years old, and the Phase 1 has to be at least, or no more than 18 months old, so we've got to redo that. And the record of site condition, it's another $10,000 in fees for that, and we hope to have it done in October, and we have to do that before we can get a building permit. So,
Thank you, Mr. Templeton.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks. You explained it well. I understand now with delays. I hope that things start smooth sailing moving forward so you can get it going. So,
well, the owners
best of luck.
are most anxious, so we're looking forward to clearing all those hurdles.
Just 1 second, Mr. Templeton. I have 2 more. Councillor Abel, and then Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Templeton, 2 questions. One, could you summarize, please, the costs incurred by the owner to investigate the saving of that heritage front? You listed some costs, engineers, et cetera.
Well, there are 2 engineers' reports, and I believe both of those reports are in the vicinity of $5,000 each. The one by AMR was, that consultant was retained by your staff, but we understood, and the owners agree, that they will pay the fee for that engineer, and that invoice has issued already. So approximately $10,000 for 2 reports at about $5,000 each for structural.
Thank you. And second, the salvaging of the heritage aspect of the building. So I see in the report that you're going to identify and salvage materials and use your original bricks. So I would guess that not all the bricks are going to be suitable when they fall, and a lot of them will crumble, no doubt. You'll probably, I don't know what your percentage will be, but let's just use a figure of 50% for the moment. Are you going to then reconstruct and then use other materials to make it look exactly the same as what we see right now with that facade?
That's the intention through you, Mr. Chairman, to recycle as much of the brick as Councillor Abel has referred to. There's bound to be some loss, but hopefully there's enough brick that's salvaged from that can be applied to the front. But whatever, even if all of the brick was just totally unsuitable, the intention is that the front part of that building will look just like it looks today, but be new construction.
Thank you. And so if a couple of the frames on the doors or windows crumpled or were unsuitable, you would manufacture something to look exactly the same and use that in new construction material so that to the layman passing by, it would look exactly as it does now.
Yeah, it would have the same architectural characteristics, but it would be new construction. And I think you'd find that as part of the existing agreement, there are elevations that are drawings in that agreement, and those elevations are based on that front facade. And so whether it's was able to be preserved or whether it's new construction, the intention is that they will look the same.
And one last question, Mr. Templeton. If we are reconstructing this and using new material, you are probably going to be able to modernize and enhance that front lobby look in your new construction going forward.
I'm getting a little out of my depths with architectural detail, but my understanding was that in the lobby part at the front, there was intended by the architect to be some effort to preserve certain elements of the old building and put those as features into the lobby area.
On the inside in the lobby?
Yes.
What are significant? And who would be able to determine that?
Well, the architect is chiefly, the professional looking after that, and that's Drew Laszlo, architect. And I suppose that it's conceivable there might be some consultation with the committee or the Heritage Committee. I don't know.
Well, to date, I take note of the attempt to do exactly as we had asked as the Heritage, and notwithstanding, it sounds like it's going to come forward as intended, but just a different route.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good to see you again, Mr. Templeton.
Thank you, Councillor.
Just wanted to ask, Councillor Abel was kind of poking at it. I just thought I'd go a bit further. You mentioned in his response to his questions that the engineers' reports, the two of them, cost about $5,000 a piece for $10,000. But you also mentioned that they spent considerable monies in, excuse me, in underpinning the facade. I don't know what number was that. What did the underpinning cost?
Well, I've been advised that it's upwards of $100,000 that has been spent on that.
Right.
And that's the only information that I have on it.
So my question is, if the intent was to save the facade, wouldn't you have spent the $100,000 anyways? Because you would have had to underpin the facade, and then presumably you would have adjoined the new build onto it, and then the underpinnings would have been removed. So the underpinnings were by nature, they were a necessity, because if you were going to proceed with the construction as planned, you would have had to underpin the building anyways. Is that not correct?
I think that's the case, through you, Mr. Chairman, that the underpinnings were a required part of the old structure to preserve it because of the nature of the old construction and the condition of footings and foundation walls. The underpinnings were necessary. So if that was preserved, if that was to be preserved, then the underpinning work was towards that. But as it's turned out with the structural engineering reports, the work is unfortunately a throwaway cost in the circumstances, assuming the building's removed.
Thank you. And that's what I was just getting at, because it seems to me that would have been a cost they would have had to have taken into account from the outset. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other comments or questions for the first time? I'll go to Councillor Abel for a second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If it pleases Council, I would like to ask that we move this item forward for...
Once we receive the delegation, we'll do that, Councillor Abel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, not seeing any other questions, I'll call a vote. All those in favor? Receiving? Opposed? That carries. And we do have some advisory committee agenda, minutes on the agenda. Does any of the chairs want to make a presentation or speak to them? Okay, so, all right. So we'll move to items requiring separate discussion. Councilor Abel, would you like to?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that we move item 17 forward.
So can I get a seconder? Councilor Humphreys, all those in favor, moving it forward? Opposed? That carries. So we'll start with number 17. Okay. So we'll start with number 17. It's pulled by Councilor Tom.
Thank you. I'll move the recommendation.
Seconder? Councilor Humphreys. Councilor Tom.
Thank you. So there's a number of things in item 17. I'm really speaking to on our agenda. Let me just find it here 1 second. Yeah, item 7, I suppose, is it? Within item 17, which is what Mr. Templeton was delegating to. So we talked about this last time when it came up to council. This originally came to the committee with one engineer's report, and the recommendations at that committee to the Heritage Committee were to agree to the demolition, and basically the conditions were almost identical to what you see before you. They were a bit different. If you look at the minutes, in the last Heritage meeting, after the second engineer's report, we tweaked them to say congruent with in terms of the new build, and we toughened the language up a little bit with respect to the reconstruction. But when you go back to the first meeting, it's essentially the same recommendations on one engineer's report. The committee, which was unanimous at that time, decided that they would like to get an opinion from a heritage engineer or an engineer that had experience in preserving heritage buildings. What ended up happening was we basically got essentially got a peer review. And when we asked the guy at the engineer, I forget his name, who did the peer review, we asked him if he had any specific experience in preserving heritage buildings, and he kind of said, yeah. So he didn't. It wasn't exactly what we asked for, but it did fill, I guess, the technical boxes that the committee had asked for and that council approved. So we were presented with a situation at the Heritage Committee where we have two engineering reports. Or an engineering report and essentially a peer review of that report, suggesting that the building was not feasible to maintain the facade. The report didn't say it was unsafe. It said it was not feasible. Feasible, I would imagine, being, and I could be corrected, so if someone has any corrections to make, that would be fine. But not feasible meaning it was too expensive. To save the facade would not be feasible for the owner. The committee was not happy about it. And we were pretty unanimous in that displeasure, because this building is the last of 3 Doan houses. Now I understand it's going to be rebuilt under the recommendations, but it's that's a small recoup for the town. I mean, this is the last of 3 Doan buildings. One of them's a drugstore, and one of them's a dollar store. One of them's a parking lot. Anyhow, so the reason I wanted to pull this and move the recommendation is, as I asked the delegate just now, the 100 Gs that he talked about as the cost were planned costs for his build originally. He was supposed to maintain the facade, underpin it, and then connect it with the old building. And so those costs would have been budgeted when he agreed to the town to do that. Where the committee, the Heritage Committee that is, was unhappy with this whole process, as it seemed, and I know it's not intentional, I'm not accusing people of any pernicious intentions, but the fact is that this is coming back long after the agreement between the town and the proponent, and the building is now half destroyed and needs to be fully taken down. So the hands of the committee were pretty much tied. The only reason I'm going on about this is because, in my opinion, $30,000 to the Heritage Reserve Fund, I mean, the heritage value of the house is priceless. So 30 grand in compensation or in understanding of the town's position that now we've lost a significant heritage building that can never be recouped, even if it is rebuilt, to me and to the committee seemed like a reasonable amount of money to ask for. And so that's all I really have to say now. I suppose if anyone has any questions about what happened at the committee, I'd be happy to answer them. And I'd like to see what everyone else has to say. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate your comments, Councillor Tom, because, again, we mentioned earlier that Councillor Abraham and I were on the committee when this came before us, and we were really excited when the developer came forward and said they were absolutely going to keep that structure. And because of that, we full force gave it full approval. And we did, there were a few things that the committee did, maybe not give the easiest time to the developer, but at the end of the day, they supported the build, and we're excited about it. It's a shame, it really is. I've received many calls over this and emails of concern. I'm thankful that you're rebuilding it to look like it is. I mean, it sounds like that's the only alternative at this point. We've been here before when buildings get to a point where you can't save them anymore. And I may ask for a review later at the end of this meeting today, maybe just to ask how we could prevent, during the construction of a new build with this premise of keeping an old portion of the building intact, like how did we get here? Because when this became before committee back, I think it was 2012 maybe, 11, I'm not sure, there was no word that the building was not of any, there was no problems. There was no talk of this building being so, what's the term I'm looking for? Not decrepit, what's the word? Dilapidated. It was actually beautiful inside and out. But through the years, the care of the building while construction went on is what I see. The care of it just doesn't happen. And it may be just a process. And some of the challenges the poor builder had, it sounds like every step of the way he's got a lot of roadblocks. So I hope that moves away from this process and he gets some things going. In terms of the $30,000, which is really the ask of the developer, through you, Mr. Muno, is this not a typical thing we do for most buildings that at the end of the day are demolished for whatever reason? And just want to confirm with you that is this something we do? And I think I've even seen a lot higher than this, if I'm not mistaken.
Mr. Ramuno?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we established our Heritage Reserve Fund, I believe, a couple of years ago, and I believe we've imposed a similar type of condition on the 4 or 5 occasions. And yes, I mean, it has been a lot higher. In a couple of last instances, about $50,000, as much as $250,000, if you recall, for the reconstruction of the Enos Lundy House at the northeast corner of Bayview and St. John's.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that's what I wanted to share with the developer, that we've had as high as $250,000 to ask the developer to do what they can to save the building or reconstruct. So I know you've gone through a lot, and I really wish it didn't, but I do feel that helps contribute to the town to keep the committee going, to keep the preservation of salvage materials going in the project that we have, and we need all the help we can get because we're losing a lot of buildings. And Wellington is beautiful, and this was one of the kind of the stars on Wellington. So we're going to lose it, but it's going to look the same, which is great. And I love the fact that you're going to salvage every item you can with the reconstruction, which I really, really like and appreciate that. But from my perspective, I really would ask the builder. I know it's going to be tough to hear this, but I feel that the financial contribution to the town is something that, as much as I hate, I think it's the right thing to do. I hate it personally for the builder, but I do think it's a great gesture for our town to all work together and keep our heritage going.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sometimes I have a hard time reading what's bold and what's added by the committee and what's the staff recommendation. Through you to Mr. Amuno, was the $30,000 staff recommendation, or was it a committee-driven funding amount?
Mr. Ramuno, sorry.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that was a staff condition imposed.
Thank you very much. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Berry. Councillor Abel.
Thank you. A lot of what I was going to say has been said. I have found the journey for the applicant, the developer, to be a long one. He has done everything we've asked to get to this stage. I truly believe he was going to follow through, and he's going to in another way. It's time consuming. I do not want him to be out of pocket or time consumed beyond what we would normally expect in any sort of project at this scale. The amount, 30,000, was probably a bit less because, in my opinion, it's 34 units in the apartment. Some of the other ones were bigger because they were big housing developments, and so maybe based on percentage in context, that might reflect that amount. I did ask Mr. Templeton for how much they were out of pocket. He did mention the underpinning, so again, I appreciate that they had to do it before, but he did only mention $10,000. If he's asking for a bit less, if he's satisfied it's not a penalty, but something that we use to cherish our heritage moving forward, I would ask that we take $10,000 off the 30 and make it $20,000.
Thank you, Councillor Abel. Mayor Dow. Oh, is that an amendment? Sorry.
I was going to see if anyone else had comments, but I don't mind making that amendment, Mr. Chair.
Would you like to? We'll let Mayor Dow speak first, and then we'll come back to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I respect Councillor Tom's opinion, and indeed the $100,000 is sunk cost by the builder. I think what the delegate was simply saying was that that money was spent. Now that indications show that the front part, the facade, is no longer able to be kept, his comment was an additional $30,000 he views to be a penalty for something that may or may not have been able to be foreseen. But as we have run into at the Family Leisure Complex, an example in the sorry, Councillor Abel. In an area that we didn't even work on with the rink, is that when we opened up something and found that there was issues. So that happens. So I would tend to support, and certainly Councillor Abel was to bring that amendment forward, I would certainly support that. I am quite interested in putting money into that heritage fund, but at the same time, I think we need to be fair to people who are coming in and looking at, because that area sure needs a bit of a facelift. So I think we need to be doing a bit to at least say that yes, we're willing to work with people and see what we can't move forward on. So I would certainly support that kind of amendment.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. Did you want to speak, Councillor Kim, before, or okay, Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Ramuno or whomever can answer this, the party that paid out the $250,000 at St. John's and Leslie, who might that party be, and how much land did that developer working towards?
Oh, Mr. Ramuno.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that was Mattamy was the developer, and they had a designated home on the property that their intent was to, again, preserve it and refurbish it. They approached the committee about a year ago that they felt it was beyond repair, and they made the similar request to have it demolished and reconstruct a new dwelling that looked essentially the same as the original farm home. And that was, we imposed a $250,000 contribution in that case.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ramuno. I think in terms of, if we were to compare the range of, I'm not sure what you call this, a permit or a penalty or whatever it is, it's hard to compare this specific scenario on Wellington versus the one on St. John's. The developer is much different, and also the land and the profitability and the scale is much different. So I think the 250,000, you can't really compare that to this situation and say that 30,000 is a tiny amount. I'm not that knowledgeable about heritage homes and all the processes regarding it, but I think it seems that perhaps maybe Hack can take this away for future meetings, that there should be maybe a formula or some kind of, or maybe there is that I'm not aware of, but from what I'm hearing, it seems like these amounts that we're asking builders to pay is kind of random, and there's no.
Councillor,
am I wrong?
Maybe I could just get Mr. Ramuna. Is it a random number, or do we have a calculation for that?
To you, Mr. Chair, we don't have a policy or a specific formula, but in the past we based it on the value of a reconstruction. I mean, even though that $250,000 may not necessarily be enough to actually reconstruct a home, but that's what we started off with our first financial contribution. And in a couple other instances, with smaller properties, we've imposed, I think in a couple instances $75,000, and then one $50,000, and it was just really based on the significance of the building and the size of the structure in question.
Yeah. So I think my point is that perhaps going forward, so that we don't have these types of issues in terms of we're going back and forth in terms of the number, maybe we can really tighten the methodology behind how we come up with this number, so that it's fair for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kim. Councillor Abel, would you like to put forward that amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to put a motion on the table that we reduce by $10,000 the expense incurred for the 2 engineering reports.
Seconded by Mayor Dahl. Sorry. Councillor Humphreys instead.
I basically gave my comments before, Mr. Chair, so I'll leave it up to the floor.
Okay. Any comments or questions on the amendment? Councillor Perry, Tom, Humphreys.
I would just simply state that I disagree with 2 reductions of $5,000. We asked him, in addition, to present 1 report. It was my understanding the other first engineering report was something that had to be done to justify his position, and that's something that's required. But we went back and we asked for another report, and I don't think the applicant should be out of pocket for us wanting to double check the work. I don't think that's appropriate, so I think 5 is probably a better number. I'd make that amendment.
Is that an amendment to the amendment?
We're just amending a number. It's not contradictory.
Mr. Clerk? Yes.
Thank you. Through Mr. Chair, I would suggest that the actual amendment is not just a matter of reducing it by 10, because when you're amending a clause to a motion, you have to, by the amendment, change the words. So I believe the amendment, although not precisely stated as such, is to change $30,000 to $20,000. So now to say to do it by 5 would be to alter that amendment substantially. If that's committee's intent, or it will, certainly it would be in order to defeat the amendment and then propose that amendment. But
thank you, Mr. Clark. Okay. Councillor Tom? You're okay? Councillor Humphreys? To the amendment.
To the amendment, Mr. Chair, just not to be, I think the 10,000 off, to Councillor Abel's point, the peer review that we sort of demanded, and I think just helps him with some of the challenges had in the past, so I'm okay with it.
Okay. Councillor Tom.
Thank you. And I guess I just wanted to say, just for clarity of the GC, is that the peer review that we asked for was because the original study did not give any indication that there was a attempt to save the building. It was just, this is the reasons why it needs to be removed. So the Heritage Committee felt, and the council passed, having another study done so that we can make sure that if there is anything that can be done to save it, that we understand that fully. Now, it turned out that there wasn't, so here we are. One of the other reasons that, and again, you can read the report in the minutes, the original engineering report basically said that the reason they wanted to remove the building was because the masonry was 142 years old, and it wasn't to current code. I don't know who in their right mind would buy a 142-year-old house and believe that the 142-year-old house had brand new masonry and was built to code, today's code. So anyhow, we'll see how it falls. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Tom. Any other comments or questions to the amendment? Okay, I'll call the vote on the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Oh, I need to vote? Sorry. Okay, we'll do that again. No, it's fine? You carried it. I carried. Okay. Back to the main motion as amended. Is there any comments or questions to it? I'll call the vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? That carries. Okay. Is there anyone else in the crowd that is here for anything specific? Mr. Clerk, if you could just quickly.
Thank you. Through Mr. Chair, General Committee's recommendation, which is still subject to ratification at Council next week, it adopted all the Heritage Committee recommendations, with the exception that instead of the $30,000 financial contribution to the town of Aurora's Heritage Reserve Fund, it'd be a $20,000 contribution to the Heritage Reserve Fund. So that'll be the recommendation before Council next week for approval.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Clark. Okay, so we'll start off with item number 1. Councillor Thompson.
I can't move the recommendation as is.
Do I have anyone to move that? Oh, Mayor Daw, seconded by Councillor Abel. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In principle, I support the town-wide conversion to LED street lighting. Certainly, I supported it at the budget process and was looking for more details or information around it. And I think that's my challenge of looking at the report in front of us. Doing my own sort of homework with regards to it. I'd feel more comfortable moving forward and awarding the contract if I had more context or comparables. Looking at other municipalities in the GTA and in the Greater Toronto area, you see some figures with regards to average price of fixtures that seem to be less than what's in our report. And so, I guess I'm looking for some further details with regard to that. I think I've seen some stuff from Whitby and Vaughan and so forth, and it's not always apples to apples, so it's hard for me, not being sufficiently knowledgeable in this, to say whether or not they're comparables or not. But the figures I want to have a sense of confidence. It's a $3 million price tag. We just spent a significant amount of time talking about the cost associated with those reports, but yet it's a $3 million contract. So I want to be certain that the figures that are being provided really are competitive in the marketplace compared to what we're seeing elsewhere, because it's a question that's going to be asked of us. In addition to that, it's really revolving around the business case for the return on investment. So, you look at the numbers and it talks about a savings of $361,000 per year, which fully supportive. But to me, it seems to be a 10-year payback. And I'm a little concerned that the warranty on these products are only 10 years as well. So we could be potentially in the position whereby, we've just got the payback, or we're still paying it off and the warranty is expired. And so, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more information around how does that warranty compare to industry standards or other companies, so that we can get a sense, again, going back to the competitiveness of the contract before us as to what else is out there. I know other municipalities, Vaughan, for example, they went with Phillips and they did something different. And so that kind of detailed business case will help provide a little bit more confidence for myself with regards to the awarding of the contract. So, those are my comments. Again, I'm supportive of the conversion, but I would just like to be able to see more details with regards to that, so that when asked by the community about, why we did this as opposed to others that are in the news, we're able to answer it. I think there is some time between now and next week for staff to provide some of those details and fill in the gaps. And so I'm hopeful that perhaps that information can be provided for us next week, so that, for myself anyways, to have that kind of detailed information would help restore some confidence with regards to the awarding of the contract.
Thank you. Mayor Daw, Councillor Tom, Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is the project that came up, we gave tacit approval, for want of a better phrase, about 6 months ago or longer, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Simonauskas.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the capital project was in 2014.
Okay, so yeah, quite a while ago. Thank you. And perhaps I could ask Mr. Simonauskas, through you, Mr. Chair, to talk a bit about, we're doing this, or the proposal is to do it through LAS. So perhaps Mr. Simonauskas could give a bit of background around why he went that route, and then certainly between now and next week, perhaps he can satisfy Councillor Thompson with some of the additional information Councillor Thompson's requested.
Mr. Simonauskas.
Certainly through you, Mr. Chair. So the report that we brought back through Council to actually engage the LAS program was the report that provided us with a direction to engage Real Term as the LAS preferred vendor, and that was approved last year or earlier this year. Where we are with regards to the program right now is we can actually have the LAS rep from Real Term. He was more than willing to come and answer any questions council may have. I suggested that we see what the interest would be at the general committee table, and if there is an interest in having him come in, he'd be more than happy to either respond to questions specifically that any councillors may have that I can get information back for next week, or come next week and be here to answer questions in person. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, if that answers your question.
Mr. Mayor?
It's really, Mr. Chair, just to get a sense of why go with LAS as opposed to someone else.
Certainly, my apologies. So with the LAS program, if the councillors recall, we actually pursued LAS initially as our first choice about 2 years ago, and that was because of their...
Mr. Chair, Mr. Simonauskas, could you explain to us who LAS is?
Certainly.
First? I should have asked that first.
Mr. Simonauskas?
So LAS are a subset of AMO, and they're our energy... they're a consolidated buyer for energy for municipalities. So the local authority services essentially provides a number of utility buying power options for municipalities, power being one of them, gas being another one. And this program, the energy lighting conversion for LED, was a program that the LAS developed about 1.5 years ago, and basically offered up to the municipalities as an option to simplify the procurement of LED lighting. So they actually went out and did the tendering process for the products, as well as working with the firm that they selected, which is Real Term Energy, to develop the programs. Our initial recommendation to Council was to pursue the LAS or the AMO model based on the fact that they had done this tendering process, and it was giving us confidence that there was somebody actually behind the program that understood the program and was applying it systematically throughout the province. So we didn't have to learn all the ins and outs of the program. Where we are right now with that is LAS, we were actually moving in a different direction late last year. However, right near the end, around November, we got notice that LAS actually went out for a second tender call to reconfirm their pricing for their products based on the rapidly changing environment. And this maybe speaks to the council's concerns with competitiveness and pricing, because this is something that we've been concerned about as staff all along, because it's a very dynamic market. So with the LAS second tender call and the reconfirmation of their prices for their products, the Cree product being the preferred vendor that they've selected, there's additional confidence that we have a very economical fixture. At the end of the day, really what we're trying to do is work through the process both as staff and with the expertise of LAS and Real Term to provide the most economical and most favorable solution for the town.
Mayor Daw? Just before I go to Councillor Tom, I just want, Mr. Simonauskas, is there any way, I mean, what I'm hearing is we'd like to see some of the comparables and something before us next week. So is there any way we can kind of get that for next week in time?
To you, Mr. Chair, I've made a note of that, and I will reach out to the representative to have him compile some comparators. They have actually signed on 100 municipalities right now, so I'm sure we could work with that list of approved towns that have gone forward.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to that next week. Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Mr. Simnovskis as well. And forgive me if this is outlined in the report somewhere, but what is the, assuming this gets approved, what is the projected timeline for conversion?
Mr. Simnovskis.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. Their target to us is a 3-month time frame. Essentially, we're looking at early spring of 2016 because of the winter season. One of the concerns that they had with regards to the timing of the approval of our project was engaging vendors within the community based on their workload. So they're projecting a fairly heavy fall. So we've added basically 3 months to a start of sometime in January. So project initiation in January and completion March.
Councillor Tom.
Thank you. So that means the entire town will be converted in 3 months.
It's a very quick process.
So my question again to Mr. Simnovskis would be, is it, and again, apologies if this is outlined in the report, I didn't see it. Is there any comparables to what it would be in terms of cost if it was phased in over a number of years? I mean, it's $3 million up front for a 3-month conversion. What would be a scenario if we, say, split that up over 3 or 4 or 5 years?
Mr. Simnovskis.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. I would suggest that would be a more costly approach based on the administration and constant management of the vendor and the contractor to actually make the change. The model that we've presented and the model that was presented to us is based coming in and making a change in and out one shot. As a comparator with regards to the water meter change-up program that we're doing right now, that's a substantially more expensive program, and the rate of return is much lower. We're looking at a 60% savings just right out of the bat with this program. The water meter change-up program, the rate of return is much lower because we're looking at 3 or 4% savings as far as recapturing revenue. That program we did phase out over multiple years because the return was so low. So the economics of this project suggest the best approach is to just do it once and start saving the money right off the bat.
Councillor Tom.
Thank you. And I guess my last question would be on page 7 of the report. It talks about how the different options for the alternative options for funding. In the middle of the page, I think, right? Because you've recommended that is that for Mr. Elliott? You've recommended debenture financing, but the middle point is internally financed from the Hydro Sale Investment Reserve Fund with a council-approved repayment plan. So I just want to get an explanation on that, and maybe it's because I'm new to council, but if the proposal is to spend hydro funds, why do we have to pay it back?
Mr. Elliott.
Through you, Mr. Chair, when we were discussing the financing for the Joint Operations Center, it became clear that utilizing the hydro money once and funding the project was not an option of council. Council made it very clear that that was not an option for us to consider. We then suggested, let's borrow it and pay it back with interest. That too was received with mixed reviews and ultimately turned down. At the current time, I can actually borrow money at a lower rate than I can earn by investing it. That's last week. And so that's my critical decision was why borrow money or why take money from an investment that I could be earning 2.8% when I could get that money cheaper somewhere else, and that's on the outside. So fundamentally, I agree with you that it makes sense to borrow internally, pay it back with interest, provided that that interest rate is higher than it would earn otherwise, and that the interest rate that we would be paying that reserve is lower than we would be borrowing outside. So that's the thinking and the logic, because you want to make the best decision. When I can invest at 2.75 or 2.85 on a 15-year bond, but I can borrow that money at, go to a 10-year bond. 2.72 I can invest it in and earn, and yet I can borrow that from Infrastructure Ontario at 2.25. And so I'm recommending that we debenture this at 2.25.
Councillor Conte. Thank you. Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A lot of my questions have been answered, and Now, the report is very detailed. There's a summary letter that was provided on page 12 of the consulting report of Real Term. And I guess just for next week, what we're asking for, just to confirm, is a comparison of municipalities who have already converted and what their savings actually were. And are we actually looking with this vendor or with other vendors?
Mr. Simonoxis, will the comparables be other vendors? And
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to be clear, so I can have the consultant identify other municipalities that have converted and where their energy savings are coming in. The second question is that the vendor that we're using, the product supplier, is the approved supplier through the AMO program based on their tender. So we're not looking to go out and tender again because we piggybacked on their process.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think I'll appreciate the additional information for sure, because I'd like to see the proof in terms of why we're doing this and why we're doing it all at once. But I do think the report's quite thorough, and we need to do this. It is the right thing to do. It is a hefty investment for sure. So I'd like to see what the actual results are for those municipalities, but I don't think we have really much choice in this direction. Maybe misunderstanding the intent, but anyway, I look forward to next week.
thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the way I look at it is phasing in, so there's not too much of a funding blow to the budget, is we're doing this on a 10-year debenture. So financially, we're doing it at a great rate. This is a great way of phasing it in over 10 years. We will realize the savings over and over again as this goes forward, especially with the projected energy increases from the province, which is crippling our economy. I think to save money, it is prudent to find savings in energy, and LED is the way to go. What we want to be concerned about, what we want to have confidence is say, like some 25 years ago when you had a computer and you said, buy this computer, we'll do a 2-year plan, and by the time you paid that computer off in 2 years, they had something that performed 10 times as efficiently for 1/4 the cost. But you were locked in on that 2-year thing, which you thought was a favor, but you were taken. So that's the sort of thing I want our council to feel good about. I really do appreciate the role that AMO performs for the municipalities. They find commonalities. It's much like our N6, where we look for efficiencies there, where we get our garbage and insurance. Collectively, we get a better rate. Here we have 444. I think there's 442 municipalities that participate with AMO. We have it on a huge scale. So we do want to realize the confidence. We are prone, and we have found out by experience, that when we put an RFP tender out, we are bound by the lowest price. We saw that in construction of one of our facilities we'll be talking about later on today. And where we may or may not know if we got the best product, as in the case with computers, this is a new technology and it is rapidly exchanging. And as it's pointed out in the report, last LAS went back out in 2014 just to make sure that what they had provided for the municipalities as a tender was in fact the best tendering process. We don't know exactly what that is, and so we are asking for some of the metrics that they were able to come to that. So tendering process, what sort of people were involved. For us, we need to eliminate a lot of what we could be prone to fall into in a mistake by going the wrong way. So I appreciate that if there's already 100 municipalities, as it says in the report, that have used the AMO LED recommendation, that we are on the right path for quality and cost, and that the product is the best and at the best price and can be delivered. Because don't forget, often you can be promised a good price, but the delivery of the service and or product is a whole another matter, and you might be prone into delays or shortcomings or overruns or whatever. So it is a great investment. It's, I believe, well overdue, because we had talked about this all last term. I think we talked about it in our second year. And so I'm glad to see it coming forward, and it's right on our table. So I appreciate all the work that's gone into this report, the fact that the funding is done through Infrastructure Canada and at a great rate, interest rate, and it suits our purposes to be energy efficient and environmentally sound practices, which is what we're all about when we're making decisions. So I'm all for moving forward with this, and if some of the metrics can be brought so that we can feel a little more confident about it, that'd be great. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor Abel. Councillor Perry.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Elliott, does the payback schedule contemplate higher energy rates? And if so, if they don't, will we end up actualizing a payback quicker than the 10 years?
Mr. Elliott.
Through you, Mr. Chair, debentures are fixed payment schedules, very much like a locked-in mortgage. There's no balloon payments. There's no changing the payment. If we were able to do that, yes, we would. Right now, they're based on the current anticipated savings. We would fund the debenture payment with the savings each year. As the savings increase over time, thanks to inflation of the rates, those savings would be realized to the taxpayer.
So the question was, will we be not just inflation, but the rising rates?
Right.
Are those factored into the discussion, or will we be seeing more savings than what we see in front of us?
I believe on there's a section in the report that speaks to the range of savings that the consultant outlined based on his forecast rates.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can answer the question. So,
the
forecast right now is based on our current energy costs. So the answer is yes. The savings will be actually growing every year based on the fact that we won't have to be paying these additional costs per kilowatt.
Thank you, Mr. Simonakis.
Perfect. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. After reading the Mr. Simonakis' report, I can see that he's a strong proponent of the kitchen sink school of reports. It actually got my head dizzy reading and trying to make heads or tails of everything. But I thank you for the level of detail. Given the 2C lands are quickly going up, and we anticipate, I guess, maybe 3 to 5 years for that area to be completed, I'm not sure if it's just the bulbs that are going in, someone just kind of twisting it out and twisting something new back in. But is there an extra cost or conversely, is there a savings by implementing this now while the 2C lands are going up? Because you don't have to remove anything or take down any other equipment. Is there any savings in starting this now in that quadrant?
Mr. Simonakis.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. In 2012, staff undertook a study to determine the viability of LED lighting because it was new in the market at that point in time, and concluded that it was a viable product, but the costs were still high. However, for 2C, we made that a condition of approval that they install LED lighting within their subdivision. So all of 2C is LED converted now. I'm sure, though, from the time we actually made that requirement to the time they actually installed the lighting, the costs have come down for them as well. But we just felt it prudent to make that part of their condition of approval.
Thank you, Mr. Salas. Councillor Kim.
Yes, and through you to Mr. Elliott. Mr. Elliott, you were talking earlier about the cost of borrowing and the returns on the hydro funds, the returns being higher than what the borrowing costs are. Now that I believe we've officially approved the investment into the one investment funds. Is it likely, I'm thinking with the different pool funds that are available, I'm thinking that the rate of return of the hydro funds and other reserve funds would be a lot higher than the 2 and change that was quoted in the stats in the report. So is it fair to say that returns on investment on the hydro funds would be greater and even more of a reason to use the debenture facility?
Mr. Elliott?
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely. We are still in the process of putting into place those facilities with the one funds, but you're absolutely right. We've seen longer-term returns on the equities fund from one in the range of 9 and 10% over an average of 5 or 8 years, and so it's a very attractive product. And so you're absolutely right. The rate that I quoted there for the external was a 10-year GIC. So it was pretty straightforward.
Okay. And lastly, to Mr. Simonauskas, if we waited, given that Councillor Thompson had mentioned that it'd be nice to have some comparables, and I think in all, before anyone spends any money, it's always nice to have comparables and benchmarks and so forth. Do you know of any other municipality that I recall, I think 6 to 8 months ago when we were reviewing this, I'm not sure whether it was from me kind of researching on the net or whether it came in your prior report, but I do recall there was a full list of other municipalities that have undergone this LED change. Would it be prudent to have a full comparable report and not start this for another year and a half? I'm thinking that we shouldn't be that great a rush because the borrowing costs, I don't anticipate that rising significantly in the next year or two, given the current fixed income market, and given that the trend is for the LED lighting technology to be cheaper and become more efficient going forward. I'm thinking it might even be helpful for us to get more facts, see what the other municipalities are doing and what their actual numbers are and the savings, and maybe even wait another year and a half. What are your thoughts on that?
Mr. Simonauskas?
Certainly through you, Mr. Chair. With regards to the time, if this was 2012, I'd say your suggestion of waiting is bang on, and that's what we did in 2012. The market has matured substantially in the last 3 years, and we've seen a stabilization of the technology as well as the cost of the price for the units. The opportunity of this change out versus the cost of borrowing is also substantial. We're talking about a 60% or a 50% at least anyway in energy savings, cutting our bill in half for marginal borrowing cost. I mean, even if a rate was 5%, the benefit is still substantial. So I don't think, even though interest rates will be low for a number of years yet to come, I don't think that really has effect. It's really the savings in energy or the savings in cost of energy that's the benefit of this program. And you also mentioned the concern with other municipalities and the number of users or number of municipalities that have bought into the program. Initially, when we looked at this, we would have been one of the first municipalities if we had jumped into the program in 2014, 2013, when AMO launched the initial announcement. So that was late 13, and we were hoping to jump on board. We would have been one of the first. Now there's, again, over 100 municipalities that have signed on to the program. Newmarket actually is I think, midway through their conversion. And I travel north often, and there's Innisfil that I'm aware of that was brought to my attention. Still just agreed to proceed with the program, I think just last month. So the conversions are starting to happen more locally. The larger municipalities, it's a bit more of a challenge. This program is really geared to the mid-sized municipalities, a lot more rural municipalities, because the program is smaller, so the cost seems more attractive. However, I could imagine for the City of Toronto it might be in the tens of millions of dollars, but the savings, again, are substantial. So I believe that the due diligence has been done. And if I could suggest through the chair, both the AMO rep as well as the real term rep have both offered to come to council to speak both to the AMO program or the LAS program as well as our project specifically through the real term study. I'd be happy to invite them both in if that would be preferable as well. Get the information requested tonight, have that submitted, as well as have the two reps come in to answer any other questions or at least have a conversation around their experiences if that's helpful.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Simonoskis. Is there any way to that suggestion that we could have those reps come in next week?
I did tee up with Real Term, so he is available for next week. I have to confirm with the LAS rep. I'm sure, but he's offered in the past, so I'm sure if he's in town, he'd be happy to come as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kim? You're up. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you very much. Just to be clear, I'm not so much concerned about the process or the program itself. I understand them very well. I've had lots of opportunities to speak to them both at AMO and in prior reports. It's about the product. It's about the awarding of the contract for that product and the comparables that are out there. And so, you've spoken a little bit about the stabilization of the unit price. So how does Cree Canada Lighting compare to Philips, which Vaughan went with, and other municipalities? So to get that sense, because when I look at some of those reports, it seems to indicate that the unit price that Vaughan is cheaper than the unit price that we're proposing. We're talking about $713 per unit price. But I don't know if we're comparing apples with apples or apples to oranges. And so that's why I say, I'm not looking for anything substantive, but just to supplement the information we have in front of us by giving us some of those comparables. You talk about a number of different municipalities, both in York Region as well as in the GTA, that have gone with this project. Is everybody using Cree Canada Lighting, or are they all using different things? And so, having some of those comparables, addresses those issues of whether it is competitive pricing. I hear that, yes, LES went through a competitive process and we should accept that on face value. I'm asking for a little bit more. I'm asking for some actual numbers, some actual details, so that I'm not just taking it on face value, that I can look at those comparables, because if it does come to light that somebody got it substantially more or there's a difference, I'd like to be able to respond to those residents' requests, because it is a significant amount of money. I understand the operational savings. I understand the financing requests and stuff. It's just really more around the product itself. I would love for Real Term to come. I'm not really needing of LES for myself, because I want to talk more about the product. And again, 10-year warranty. Is that the industry standard or not? That does concern me, that we're talking about a 10 or 15-year AM for a product that only has a warranty of 10 years, what may or may not happen. Maybe there are other municipalities using this product and they're seeing some maintenance issues. Those are all relevant details, I think, to bring to the forefront, so that we understand the total picture, right? And I would hope that there's enough time between now and next week just to supplement the report with those additional details around the product itself, more so than the process for myself.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Humphreys for a second time.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Thompson, because now I understand what you're looking for, and that's what I mentioned earlier about different vendors. And if we can get those comparisons on, what other municipalities have gone with and how they're doing, and that's good information. In addition, because what's here to me is answered in terms of savings and and the right thing to do. So I'm absolutely in favor of that. If that's specifically what we're going to get, it'll help a lot. And I just can't help but mention, wouldn't it have been nice to have that financial, report, kind of my motion from a few weeks back. All the great interest that we're doing so well here, and I'm so looking forward to having that at our fingertips, because we could say, well, why not a debenture? Because look what we're making here. So, and I appreciate all the work that's gone into this report, by the way. Thanks.
Thank you. So, any other comments or questions? I just want to clarify with Mr. Simonoskis that next week we'll be getting some clarification with comparables and possibly having some people come in and delegating to us and presenting.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so if there are no more questions or comments, I will call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Move to item number 2, iPoll deck. Could someone move that for me? Yep. Moved by Councillor Tom, seconded by Councillor Humphreys. You guys don't mind if I speak first, do you? You know, it just, my blood boils every time I see something like this on this one. I'm just reading on page 2, which is page 65. Second paragraph from the bottom. A claim for costs related to delay of completion has been received by the town and is being reviewed. Further reporting will be forthcoming on this claim. Is it my understanding that the contractor has put in an invoice for the delays that in essence they have caused?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll start, and maybe Mr. Moore might cut me off, but the answer is yes. They have put in a claim for the extension of the completion of the contract to cover their general condition costs.
Okay, and we will be getting a report coming forward to us at some point? Would it be closed session or?
To you, Mr. Chair, depending on the nature of what transpires with the ongoing discussions with the contractor, yes, there may be a further report to council in closed session about this matter.
Okay, thank you. I don't know. I guess I'm in the wrong business. I got to start getting government clients because this is just it's just ridiculous in my mind. Councillor Tom, Councillor Humphreys.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And maybe I missed it. I just want to ask Mr. Simnoskis, when is the projected finish date for the JOC?
Mr. Simnoskis.
Certainly through you, Mr. Chair. We anticipate moving in March of 2016.
Councillor Humphreys.
Through you, Mr. Chair, back to the AFLC in this claim. Through you, Mr. Chair, is this to do with some of the change? A while back, they put in, I guess, a claim on all the change management that they did, and they decided it was, I know back then it was on a report for 160 some odd thousand, and we just said go away. Is this similar to that claim, or are we allowed to mention it here?
Mr. Simnoskis.
Certainly through you, Mr. Chair, this is related. So we had suggested an allowance of $160,000 just to make council aware of that risk. So that was what that line item was for. So it is definitely related to that.
Thank you. I just like that's the extended admin costs. Is that what it is? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a feeling that was going to come back.
Definitely. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Item number 3, Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Can I get a motion, please?
Yes, that's right. I'd like to move this as is, please.
Seconded by Councillor Perry. Thanks, Chair. Councillor Kim.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Ms. Van Leeuwen. It seems that we're extending the 1 year to because we're very familiar with them. We've had them for I guess 2 3-year contracts and a couple of 1-year extensions. Do we have any, as we said in the earlier issue, do we have any comparables, or who are the other competitors in this space, and how does the performance of OSPCA fare with others in terms of the metric of, I don't even know what the metrics are. Would it be how many dogs you catch or how many fines you... I'm not trying to be funny. I don't know what the performance metrics is in this area.
Ms. Van Leeuwen.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there are few animal service providers in this area. Richmond Hill, Markham, and Aurora are with OSPCA. There is an animal shelter in Vaughan that was recently built, owned and operated by Vaughan. And shelter services for Newmarket, East Gwillimbury, Whitchurch Stouffville, Georgina are provided through the Georgina Animal Shelter. And then the enforcement piece is contracted out independently. The only other service provider that I am aware of who's recently come on board is Canine Services. So there is very few animal service providers. I can tell you that as of last evening, Richmond Hill Committee of a Whole adopted the recommendations of staff to enter into a contract with OSPCA for the patrol and enforcement of domestic animals, and for a 2-year contract, which will be adopted next week. Well, we believe it will be adopted. We'll have to see if it's ratified at council. And Canine Services was successful in the bid for wildlife rehabilitation and hotline services. So the metrics is very difficult. We have established an oversight committee with Richmond Hill and Markham to work through some concerns in terms of reporting, consistency of standard of care, education, communication, staff resources, how they're assigned, how we're patrolling our municipalities. But the metrics has not been established.
Councillor Kemp?
Okay. So we don't even know whether so we don't even keep track of response time when residents call for a service. There's no response time metric or anything like that.
Ms. Van Loon?
Through you, Mr. Chair, they are very responsive. I would say same day. They do provide emergency call-out services as well, so they respond immediately. They have a 24-hour call center service, and they will provide that emergency call-out service to the town when they receive calls. So immediately pretty much is their response. If you have a dog at large, the response needs to be immediate. They do report to us monthly in terms of what their intake and what the results of animals that have been captured. So we do receive those reports as well. In my report, I've indicated that they've responded to 300 calls this year.
Councillor Kim?
If you were to we don't have metrics, but if you were to compare them with their American peers, do we have a rough idea in terms of are they even delivering a certain amount of service, or we don't even keep track of what American competitors are doing?
Ms. Van Loon?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have not done a comparison with American services providers.
Okay.
Councillor Kim?
Yeah, I'm just, whenever you sign a contract with the service provider and you don't really have a metric or service level kind of agreement, it's just doesn't feel great. Or even if you have a service level agreement, we don't know how it compares, right? And so that's the reason for the line of questioning. Do any of those officers who patrol 40 hours a week in Aurora, do they patrol the Aurora, the dog park up in St. John's and Aurora Industrial Park, whether they have tags and licenses? Are they checked regularly?
Ms. Van Loon?
Through you, Mr. Chair, they patrol, we have one assigned officer who patrols 40 hours a week. They do report weekly to bylaw services in terms of what's trending, what activities that they're involved with. They are patrolling all parks. And as of recently, we did partner with some of our full-time staff to undertake to do patrols in the parks, and they will take action if dogs are not licensed or dogs are at our on-leash parks. If dogs are off-leash, they will take the appropriate action.
Okay. Councillor Kim?
I'm not, if anyone's wondering why I have so many questions when I don't even have a pet myself, but I found that, a few months ago, my wife was bit by a dog that was not on a leash, and I see a lot of that, when I'm taking walks, or even a few years ago when my kids were younger, I got in big trouble for my wife for not covering up the baby when a big dog without a leash was, and so that's my background as to why I'm kind of sensitive to this, and I see a lot of poop on the sidewalks as well that I think a lot of owners are not being responsible. Last question, regarding the RFP from Georgina, it seems like they're doing this RFP on behalf of the N6. Are we contributing to the consultant costs?
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, we are not. They're undertaking to do this study as they have issues with the shelter that they're currently running, being over capacity, and they are going to need to look at options. They are fully funding the cost of the consultant.
Okay.
Councillor Kemp?
Great. Yeah. I'll support the report, given that there's lack of choice out there, and I do trust staff in their recommendations, especially in this regard. So I'll support the report.
Thank you. Before I move on to Councillor Thompson, just want to mention that in the report on page 3, it does mention that we are entering a phase 1 of a 2-phase study with a completion date of the fall of 2016. So the town will be doing that study to get a better understanding of the growing needs. So we will be taking care of that study, and it will be coming to us in the fall. Correct, Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you to you, Mr. Chair, Georgina's leading that study. We will be participating, and the outcomes will come forward to council. Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Most of it's been addressed. Just to add a quick little comment. I mean, it certainly has been an issue that's come before council numerous times over last term, and I would encourage those that are not too familiar to read the 2012 report, which does gives a good overview of the alternatives. And Ms. Van Leeuwen stated, yes, there aren't very many, but I'm looking forward to finally seeing that report on the N6 study. I know we've talked about it at length. We do certainly all agree that there is an opportunity for it as a result of the limited options available, and so I think that until that's ready, it is good to support this and keep moving forward until we have an opportunity to look at that and assess the options available.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Abel.
Thank you. So I just did a bit of quick math, and when you don't have very many options, through you, Mr. Chair, just to be sure I got my numbers right. Last year was $209,000, $210,000, and it was for 379 calls. All right. So quickly, it works out to $17,500 a month for 30 calls a month average. So we're paying a person 40 hours a week. So 160 hours a month, that's 17,000. So we're basically paying $100 an hour for the person to move around and take 30 calls in a month. So if anyone needs a business to look into.
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd like to emphasize that also includes the shelter service.
Of course it does.
So these animals are being cared for, and some of them for long periods of time, and they are under the care of a vet, and so it does include the shelter service costs as well.
And how many dogs have we, or animals have we put in the shelter out of the 380 calls in 1 year?
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, in total 38 dogs to date, 78 cats, and they have 11 dogs have been adopted and 53 cats have been adopted. 18 dogs have been returned to their owners. 1 cat has been returned to the owners, and then 4 dogs have been euthanized. 13 cats have been euthanized, and 5 dogs are still in care, and 11 cats are still in care.
Thank you very much. And I don't have the math for their stay, but it would probably be comparable to a good hotel, I would say.
So we do have a hotel in town.
Oh, yeah. Actually, we don't have one in Aurora. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So it does provide a service. So it is for care, and through you, Mr. Chair, if someone is to see a dog off leash, do they call the SPCA?
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Chair, they can either call the OSPCA or they can call the town directly, and we will call the OSPCA on their behalf.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Councillor Abel. Councillor Humphreys?
Thank you. Everything's been said.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Item number 4, Councillor Tom.
Thank you. I'll move the recommendation.
Seconded. Councillor Perry. Councillor Tom.
Thank you. I just had one quick question. I'm glad to see this coming forward again. I think we were asking about it at the last council meeting, the last few council meetings, so glad to see it coming forward. On the second page of the report, it talks about the eligibility of events for the grant that we're applying for, and it was just kind of confusing. So it said eligible events can take place anytime between now and December 31st, 2017, but it's not eligible for celebrations between June 21 and July 1. So they won't pay for events in the lead up to July the 1st. So I just wanted to have maybe an explanation as to why.
Mr. Downey or CAO?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. They will not, and that's the rules. They do not wish to tie this into the Canada Day celebrations.
Councillor Tom?
Thank you. That was it.
Thank you. Councillor Abel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we are going to apply for the grant, and once we have the grant, then we're going to get a committee? Through you, Mr. Chair?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct.
So what would the role of the committee be?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we were looking at a model similar to that of the Aurora 150. So once the money was secured, then we would come forward with a report to council stating that we have obtained funding in X number of dollars, and that we would then move forward with a committee in the structure that you see before you, and they would act very similar to the way the committee operated for Aurora 150.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, through you, how is it you're going to ask for grant money from the federal government? Are you going to outline what events it is, or are you just going to give them a drop-down number and see what we get back? It just seems to me that if I was granting money, I would want to know what you're doing with it.
Mr. Downey?
To you, Mr. Chair, we are going to be providing a outline of events. We are suggesting that it follow very similar to the Aurora 150, so we are recommending 4 events. We have still have the documentation with regards to those 4 events that were taking place in Aurora, and we also have a budget line associated with each one of those events, so we would be using the similar events, similar setup, and similar budgets for those 4 events.
So the role of the committee would then be to follow what you've outlined for them in terms of specifically with the 4 events and more of a detailed, rather than come up with a whole program.
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we're recommending 4 events. I'm not quite sure, once we secure the funding, whether those events have to be exactly as stated within the application. I suspect not. I suspect we're going to have some latitude with regards to some of that. But the main purpose of this was to bring this forward to council to show that we are not asking for any funding from the municipality. If the federal government is willing to come up with the funding to provide the program, the funding for the program, great. If not, we are not proposing to do any activities specifically for Canada 150.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. So basically my point is I think the town should commit some funding, seed money, to move forward. And if we're disappointed that the federal government decides not to fund us, I'm not in a position to say, well, therefore we're not doing anything. I think we should be putting in some seed money, whether we do it a budget. Those are a few of my comments. I don't know if that's amendment. I guess we can deal with it at budget. I don't like the idea of putting the onus on an ask at a grant and saying, well, if the feds don't come forward, then we're not doing anything. A couple of my thoughts, and I thought if a committee would be done beforehand to outline some detail, some ideas going forward before the grant application. That to me seems kind of logical. But under the format, I think the first thing we've got to do is, if there's timelines to get grant money in, the application in, but I also think we should start moving with the committee and not wait. That's another comment I have. So
Is
I think
there-
we should put some seed money in, and I also think we should move a committee, give it as much time as possible to develop and engage our community with ideas.
Thank you, Councillor Abel. Any other comments or questions for the first time? Seeing none, I just want to make one comment before I go back to you, Councillor Tom. I noticed under the committee, when we did the Aurora 150, was the committee not comprised strictly of just citizens and no council members? Mr. Downey?
To you, Mr. Chair, that's correct.
So I'm just wondering why this time we're actually including council on this. Why wouldn't we just follow the same formula?
To you, Mr. Chair, we're recommending there should be some level of council involvement. I think that would have helped with the Aurora 150 committee, quite frankly. And so we're looking at taking that model and improving it. So we believe that council sitting on the committee would be of assistance. As you know, if you were at any of the meetings, there was often members of council sitting in the room because there was a level of interest, but we feel that it might be stronger if they were actually a member of the committee.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tom.
Thanks. And after listening to Councillor Abel talk about it, I tend to agree. I mean, obviously, I brought the motion forward. I guess I thought, we'd be applying for the grant that was based on all of the below items on page 2, which was what the Canada 150 Fund will support. But I didn't realize that we were only going to go after just having 4 events and they're already kind of predetermined. I kind of thought that the purpose of the committee was to outline events and then move forward on that plan. So my preference would be to strike the committee regardless of whether we get funding, so that if we want, the application date is April 30th of 2016. So if the committee gets struck and they can use that as their deadline to make sure they get it in on time, and then because we might want to, the committee might decide that public art would be what we should go for as part of the 150, or exhibits, plaques, monuments, permanent installations. I mean, just events is a bit narrow. So for me, I think perhaps the committee could be struck now, and then add any input to what the grant request would be from the federal government before the April 30 deadline. So I guess that'll be my preference as well.
Just before I move on, I just asked the clerk for some clarification. If we wanted to move it, would that be an amendment, or would we have to defeat this clause?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You would actually have to defeat that clause because the proposed difference to strike the committee immediately is contrary to the recommendation on the floor. It's the opposite.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Mayor Dodd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to be a little contrary here, but this is the Canada 150, not the Aurora 150. So if we wish to strike a committee, then council really has to decide that we want to celebrate the 150th, regardless of whether or not the federal government is going to put any money in. We put a substantial amount of money in.
Point of order. I sort of just want to, up to the chair, reel us in a little bit. Based on the comments of Mr. Clerk, if we're opposed to moving forward with the establishment of this committee at a later date, it might make sense for us to vote against the motion, but really for everybody to go around the table to debate the issue.
Councillor Perry, I'll stop you there. I think that...
What's the point of order?
No, I feel that Mayor Dodd is just speaking to why he wouldn't be probably voting in favor of this, so I will allow him to continue speaking. Or sorry, would be voting in favor. I apologize.
I'm sorry. I'll vote for what's on the screen, because I think that if we want something else, then we as a council have to decide that we're going to celebrate the Canada 150 and allocate funding to that as a totally separate item. So I will support what's on the screen, because quite frankly, if we're going to celebrate the Canadian birthday party, they should be stepping up and helping us.
Councillor Humphreys?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm sort of in the same thought process as Mayor Daw. And the reason I'm saying it's not that I don't want to have a celebration, because we absolutely should, but we have a special events lead now under Mr. Downey. And what we could do throughout our entire calendar year is put a 150, Canada 150 flavor on all the existing events, which are incredible. And you could make it 150 theme Canada Day Parade, 150 Rib Fest, 150 who knows what. So I think we have such a great, music in the park, 150, come celebrate 150, music in the park. I think if we work with staff to layer on top of what we do for 150th, that's great. If we're going to expect a whole subset of events separately, I think it should be funded. That's just my opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Any other comments or questions? All right, I'll let you go.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Chair, apologies. And the other thing, in terms of the build of the committee, if this goes forward, I'd like to see one staff member on that committee. Right now, it doesn't have any staff.
We can get to that when we get to the terms of reference, right, and deal with that separately. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. Through Mr. Chair, Council has previously adopted a policy pertaining to all advisory committees and ad hoc committees that requires the committee not to have staff would never be a voting member of the committee. They would be a liaison to the committee, as well as another reason why you would have a member of council on that committee.
Councillor Thompson.
I'm fine with it as it stands. I mean, as stated previously, the town does put aside funds to celebrate Canada over the Canada Day celebrations, and Parks and Rec and special events do a great job with it. I mean, I see this similar to the sesquicentennial. I mean, this is if we want to hold a spring or a fall event, which is a standalone event, and I'm fine with moving that discussion to the budget time to say, okay, we're going to do this no matter what. But as it stands now, I think that the motion in front of us is fine, because it's not saying we're not celebrating Canada 150th. We certainly are with our typical celebrations. It's about creating a standalone event outside of the scope, as Councillor Tom mentioned, of the June 21st to July 1st date. So I'm okay with it the way it is.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Is there any other comments or questions? Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I recall when we did the sesquicentennial we celebrated in 2013, we struck a committee in June of 2012. And we really have to commend the efforts of that committee, because they needed more time. So the year before the event was deemed that's not sufficient amount of time. I think we all could have agreed at that time. So here we are in 2014. I recommended, before we ended our term, to put in something so that we had a placeholder so that we didn't forget about it. And here I'm looking, if I read the report, that we will get the application no later than April 30th. We don't know when it'll come back in 2016. Let's say it's a month or two, and then we strike a committee. So we're following the exact same timelines. So in the summer or spring, if we're lucky, if we get word, we'll be striking a committee and saying, okay, you've got 3 or 4 months to begin before we start celebrating next year. If the first event is in February, like it was last time, we're following the exact same road where we went rushing in with not enough time. That's why I think it's important we strike a committee now. And so I don't agree that we should go with the second clause and wait until we get word from an application that goes in April 30th. They may hold all the applications before they give any indication to, even if we apply now, they may say, well, we're waiting until they close before we gather them all and before we get back. So I think, I don't agree that we proceed with advertising after we receive word. So we're really putting a committee under the gun. Another thought is that with the pending election in 2018, whatever council member gets on there, that's going to be very advantageous moving forward for an election. So I think that's why we give special consideration for not having council, as we did in the 150th, but allow council to come in and go forward. Thirdly, I think we should ask if there were any recommendations from that committee from the sesquicentennial, if they had any recommendations, and I'll bet one of them is give us more time. So I don't know that any of that has been taken in. I am all for going forward and asking for funding. I do believe that we should put in a committee beforehand. We should put a little budget seed money in hand so that we can proceed, and then complement it with what comes forward after, and we'll be well on our way in proper timelines. So those are my comments, and I feel, I think perhaps if we call the vote on each paragraph separately, that would probably help sort this out in my mind, rather than try and get into amendments and all that. We can move forward from that proceeding after we do the votes, if we can do them in separate clauses. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Abel. Is there any other comments or questions? Did you want to speak, Councillor Tom, for briefly?
I think Councillor Abel just kind of summed it up pretty well. I mean, to me as well, there's a large scope of events and types of things you can apply for grants for, and how do you know which ones you're going to apply for if you don't have a committee to talk about it and make those directives? So I totally agree. I think that if we decide that at the end of the day we don't get any funding and we were going to just proceed with the town's regular Canada Day events, then the committee can get that direction at that time. But I think, like Councillor Abel said, having it at least have enough time to decide what the scope of what we're going to ask for and what the events are going to look like or whatever, because there's lots of things on here, not just events. That to me makes the most sense and probably get a better rate of return from a grant from the federal government. Anyhow, that's it.
Councillor Thompson.
And I don't disagree with what's been said. I just think that that's a conversation to be had at budget time then let's move some of this discussion to budget to say, fine, let's put that placeholder. We're having alternative conversations around budget pressures and so forth. And right now there is no budget allocated whatsoever. So I'm fine with bringing this back up to budget time and saying, okay, here it is. So at least then if you're bringing on committee members, they have a sense of what their budget is prior to deciding what, if any, events they'll go for if there's no funding. But I just think that, in 2 months we're going to have operating and capital budget discussions. It's certainly an appropriate time to have it. And if you were to strike the committee at Jan 1, 2016, that certainly gives them sufficient time, and that way we can have that discussion around whether or not council wants to allocate town funds for additional events.
Is that an amendment, Councillor?
No, it can be reintroduced or brought up at budget time. I just explained my rationale for the motion on the floor and saying that I don't disagree with the comments. It's just that, that's a conversation better had at budget time, whether or not we want to allocate those funds.
Okay, thank you. If I'm not seeing any other comments, I'm going to recommend that we call the third clause first, and then the first two second together.
May I?
I'll let the clerk answer that question.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, not presupposing the outcome of the vote, there certainly sounds to be a difference of opinion related to the clause on the on the committee. Procedurally, if you were to vote on the first clause and pass it assuming, a second clause pass it assuming or defeat it, and then got to the third clause and either approved it or defeated it, you have fully dealt with the main motion. And so I'm not entirely sure to be open to an amendment at that point in time. So I think it's just clear that it'd be best to just call that clause first and deal with it, since it appears from the debate to be the controversial one. No. John already requested.
John already. Okay, so I will call the vote on the third clause, that the town proceed with advertising for 5 members of the public to volunteer on a Canada 150 ad hoc committee pending notification from the government. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. First two clauses. Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Okay, number 5. Councillor Perry.
I'll move that as stated.
Seconded, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Perry.
I've stated in the past that I like the process. I continue to like the process. Under open and transparent process, item number 5, if we could give some consideration to adding OMBI as well, in addition to York Region municipalities in the Durham Region, Peel Region, and Region of Halton Hills, which have a population with 30% of our own. I think that makes sense. But the OMBI studies probably, I'd like to have those included. Yeah, Jeff looks a lot, maybe some clarity.
CAO.
The OMBI is the Ontario Municipal Benchmarking Initiative. So this is a private initiative undertaken by the regional municipalities, the City of Calgary, the City of Winnipeg. It's a sort of prescription service or fee-for-service arrangement. I think we'd have to get the approval of OMBI to disclose the information. Many of the comparators, again, relate to regional-type services. So there are some comparisons, but I think they are sensitive to sharing the information without their approval, but we could certainly do that. I know the executive director, and I can speak to that individual if that's the wish. But it is a good another thing that's useful in making comparisons. It's just that it's really something that's pretty closed, not necessarily public, undertaken by regions and some of the larger single-tier municipalities.
Councillor Perry?
We don't necessarily have to report out what those findings are, but making sure that, if we're at the high end, as a region or as the GTA and other parts of Ontario are able to drive that cost down, finding that information out and utilizing that information I think is beneficial. We don't have to publish it. We don't have to share it with the public, but just so we're utilizing it. Sorry about that. And then the other item I'd like to see, I know that we're moving along with the Citizen Budget website, and I think that's a great step. I think that we need to incorporate a more formal participatory budget system, not every year, but maybe 1 or 2 years out of a term to give residents the opportunity to let us know if they think that there are other initiatives that are important for us to move forward on. And I think we're taking the right step with the website and the web portal, but I do think that we need to give citizens a more formalized way to come together, propose ideas, have staff look at those ideas, let us know as a council what the budget would be for those ideas, and then the same group of residents could then come forward and vote on those items to let us know which ones they think would be beneficial. So it's a formalized process. It started out of Brazil a few years ago. City of Toronto's been doing it for a few years now. I think it's a good way to get some extra information in a more proactive manner than we have been, and anything we can do to help citizen engagement, I think, is something we should endeavor to go for.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Kim.
Just want to express my appreciation to all those who participated in the development of the sort of the process, policies, and directives. I know myself and the Director of Finance, Dan Elliott, have had numerous conversations around here. Again, the one thing I keep drawing attention to is I still very much want to be able to draw out the guiding principles behind it. It's a very detailed document, but I think there still needs to be some simplified language around the guiding principles. Things like the clear statement of the fact that it's the taxpayers' money, it's the residents' money, and we need to recognize that part of those guiding principles when we're doing the budget process really is the streamlining of expenditures and the optimization of revenue-making opportunities. That we're assuring, through our administrative processes, that we're ensuring, maximum efficiencies and effectiveness. Just some of these, simplified guiding principles so that it outlines, the process and the purpose behind it all. But I think it's an excellent work in progress. It's a good start. I think as we continue to work through it and apply it in this year's budget process and go forward, I think we're going to be pleased with the end result when we get to it over the next year or two. And I appreciate all the feedback from our interim CIO as well and the comments and experience he's brought forward. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also want to say that it's a job well done in formulating the process and improving the budget process. A couple of recommendations that I'd like to make, and I think that's the reason why we're seeing this again. And I think we didn't have time to pull this last time, I believe. But on page 6 of the item, on number 5 under open and transparent process, with respect to making comparisons to other municipalities, I'm thinking that not only do we look at the population of another municipality for comparables, but we should also look at the land size as well, because just like Canada, we're so huge and at the same time so inefficient because we have to deliver certain services to so vast a landmass. So I think comparing us to other municipalities, let's say Whitchurch, Stouffville, which is a lot large in area, I believe that we need to consider area as well if we're going to do comparables. As well, on the following page 8, page 90 on the agenda, number 14 at the top there, it talks about a balanced approach whereby 50% of such amount will be through internal cost reductions and the other 50% through new revenue streams, fee increases, and so forth. I'm not so convinced of having a limiting our flexibility in that regard. I think when we limit our flexibility, it limits the type of remedy or solutions that we have to resolving a budget. So, unless other people think otherwise, I think I would just like to kind of leave that as more open. That's all my comments, but very well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kim. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Thompson, second time.
I think on that point, the number 14, I know that Mr. Elliott has identified that one in the committee level and said he could see significant debate around it. I think, while I agree in principle with the point that, not to try and limit it, at the same time, I see staff's perspective as, provide us with some direction, because otherwise they may come back with a decision that council then has a different viewpoint. And so I think it's a starting point. It provides a little direction. Obviously, it then still comes forward for us to determine whether that's the appropriate course of action or not. But I think, to test out the process, some numbers got to be applied so that staff have some direction to at least initiate it. Because otherwise, I can see it working counter, where they put too much emphasis one way or another, and it's not necessarily reflective of the direction of council. So this one, I think Mr. Elliott would agree, is a little bit of a trial and error process. And so I think it's good initially to assign a value to it and then I guess reassess after we've gone through the process. That's my thoughts.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor of the recommendation? Opposed? That carries.
Thank the committee, the financial
Okay. Well, okay. Just before we go ahead, I just want to thank the work of the Finance Advisory Committee, the time and effort that they put in, and they did a great job. I know I attended. Oh, and a citizen that came out to a few of them, yes. And I know I was there for most, and I believe Councillor Abel came out to a couple also. You guys did a great job, and and I think this is a great direction that we're taking. And Mr. Elliott, thank you for your hard work also. So, with that being said, we'll move forward to item number 6. Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll move as is. I'll just move as is. Thank you.
Seconded by Mayor Dow. Councillor Abel.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate this moving forward. And I've been receiving calls from residents asking if their street would be one of the ones and when would that be announced, and we now have that before us. I guess we didn't want to let anything out before the report because I can see that there's a lot of people on other streets that are going to say, does that mean we're excluded? But a great job in identifying them, and the metrics involved. If you don't mind, through you, Mr. Chair, how did we arrive at what was chosen and what wasn't? We called them warrants in other studies. Is Is it something similar?
Mr. Simonauskas.
Certainly through you, Mr. Chair. So this first level of selection is based on monitored speeds within these various streets, and anyone that exceeded, or any street that exceeded the 85 percentile for the speed limit was ranked based on that exceedance and prioritized to give us the top 5 streets where the exceedances are the greatest. So that's how that was selected.
Councillor Abel.
Thank you very much. And I think it would be up to council to decide. We haven't even approved the first 5. Because once we receive these, are we going to move ahead with the first 5 through you, Mr. Chair?
Mr. Simonauskas.
What are the next steps?
Yes, certainly through you, Mr. Chair. I think the next very important step is a public open house, which is scheduled for Thursday, October 1st, where in the communities where these streets are being monitored, we'll be invited to come in and speak to staff about how we came up with this and what the criteria are and what the next steps are. That would probably be a very good meeting for council members to attend, to speak to any residents who may have concerns. And that's really the place where we can hear from the community and understand what other issues may exist and take that into consideration. Council also must realize that the criteria for making these kind of traffic decisions are based in policy. So we do have our policy. So our recommendations as staff will be based on the policy with any modifications as directed by council.
Councillor Abel.
Thank you very much. And so, and I don't know I should have said this, but I more or less indicated that we were doing a pilot project based on 5 streets. And perhaps it'll be something I'll bring up at council so that it's more in the public realm, but that council could consider, once those are all complete, to go ahead with to continue with another 5 streets based on the warrants and community comment and engagement. So I'm hoping that that's a communication we can bring forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Abel. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Kim.
Thank you. Just to clarify, on page 100 of the agenda, or page 3 of the item, it says open house September 30th. Is that the same one as the open house on Thursday, October 1st, 2015?
Mr. Simonauskas. There seems to be 2 dates in the report.
Oh, my apologies. You are correct. Let me just verify with the calendar here. I believe it's the October 1st date, but I want to make sure. I believe it's the October 1st. I will clarify that with the memo. My apologies. I don't know how that came about.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Simonauskas. Councillor Kim.
After implementation of the initial 5 streets, how long is this trial period and the feedback and so forth before we can, if it's positive, before we can move on to the next 5 streets or whatever the next stage might be?
Mr. Simonauskas.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that trial period hasn't really been defined. I mean, it could be 6 months, it could be a year. Really, I think it's up to the community to feedback to us what they're looking for. I do know that part of this process is to also verify that anything that we do install satisfies EMS and fire. So the infrastructure that we do put in is going to be compliant with anything that we would put in on a permanent basis. So that discussion can still happen as part of the public consultation.
Councillor Kim.
And lastly, if the results from the residents where these speed cushions are going to be located, if they decide that they don't like it, it's not working, and they want to remove it, would that be an additional? Would that double this budget of $75,000 to $100,000 for removing them?
Mr. Simonauskas.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there is a cost for removal. Yes, there will be a cost for that. This budget is to install the cushions.
Thank you.
Councillor Kim. Councillor Thompson.
On that point, through you to Mr. Simonauskas, could you provide some clarification? My understanding of the original report that came back in April was that these were temporary speed cushions, rubberized speed cushions that would be placed down, but that wouldn't be used in the winter time. And so I didn't sense from the original report that there was much cost to remove them. So perhaps you could refresh my memory and give me some details with regards to the proposed cushions, permanent, temporary, winter, when would be applied.
Mr. Simonoskis?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. I don't have those details, but I do not see the problem with having them down all year. But there's still a cost associated with the removal of them. I mean, the bottom line is there's an effort required to take them off the streets. I think if that answers your question. And the second piece to this is that even though they're temporary, they still need to comply with EMS and fire concerns. So we do want to make sure that the roads are still passable to their satisfaction.
Councillor Thompson?
I guess I'm just trying to, harmonize what you're saying with what was reported before and the fact that it wasn't going to be and that there seemed to be some difference. But perhaps we can take it offline and have some conversation going forward. But I guess if we receive this for information, it does indicate that you will then begin implementing it and installing these. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. We would wait till after the open house and then come back with a final recommendation to Council to proceed at the various locations, and then based on that approval, would then proceed and have the program unfold from that completion.
And the funding?
Mr. Simonoskis?
Because I thought this came from a notice of motion, so I don't believe there was budget approval.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there is no budget approval for this. I would suggest the budget would be from our R&R reserve. That's typically where we do any maintenance work as well, right? So that would be the fund that I would suggest. Probably as part of that final recommendation, we would have to seek approval for that funding, or I guess alternately we could bring it up as part of the budget discussions depending on the timing.
Thank you very much.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, call a vote. All those in favor to receive for information? Opposed? That carries. Item number 9. Councillor Abel.
I'll move as is, Mr. Chair.
Second, Councillor Tom. Councillor Abel.
Thank you very much. On page 4, 111 of our agenda, top item, proposed sign variance. Sign review and project plan in progress, target for new bylaw before Council third quarter. So through you, Mr. Chair, that would be coming up shortly.
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. We have a final draft, and the report is being drafted as well currently. I'm going to be I'm going to be away the first 2 weeks of October, so I would like to be here for that discussion, and I think you can expect a presentation, the report, and an outline and an overview of the changes the second cycle in October.
Thank you, Ms. Van Leeuwen. I would just like to be sure that I have taken a few residents' business calls about signs, and I think you and I have discussed it, signs that they're allowed to bring out for a 2-week period, once a quarter or something along those lines, and some businesses were saying they would like to be able to extend those periods of times. Is this more or less what this report will be addressing, that item?
Ms. Van Leeuwen?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it does address the bylaw in its entirety, permanent signs, temporary signs, strategies and going forward in terms of where we want to provide flexibility and balance that with the aesthetics and beautification of the town. So it is an all-encompassing review, and as I mentioned, I will be providing a presentation to Council.
Thank you very much. On page 113, Mr. Chair, the second item, CA05, Town Resources for Events, is in progress. Could I ask through you when we might expect that? What department is looking after that?
Mr. Downey, I'm assuming? Or CAO, intern CAO?
It's in progress. I'll have to get back to you with the details. I believe this is within the communications department, but I'll consult with them and with Mr. Downey, and I will get back to you with a memo.
Thank you very much. Just a little reminder. And I think there's one more. On page 118 of our agenda, page 11, top item, IES 7, parking regulations and enforcement's completed. So that was due to the metrics, and I think I brought this up at the last council when we did adopt this. But we're still waiting for winter parking and RV and all sort of things like that, and I believe that's still to come forward through you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Van Lien?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. We're coming back with a report on the parking program details, as well as referring the solution to the 2016 budget for consideration.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Abel?
And Mr. Chair, I think the last item is on 126. This, I think, goes back to last term. And that is the third one down, PR6, the Sports Dome. This is something that I think it's a negotiation through you, Mr. Chair. Is there any idea or any comment through you, Mr. Chair, that we might be able to have on that?
Mr. Downey or Mr. Interim CEO?
Mr. Downey?
Thank you. Yes, we are continuing to be in negotiations. It's a fluid situation, I guess is the best way to describe it. At this point, I can't report back to council on any agreements that have been signed and everyone is willing to execute. We are continuing to be in negotiations between the Aurora Youth Soccer Club and ourselves, as well as the dome owner, to determine transfer of ownership and operations of the facility.
Councillor Abel?
And just so council, for those that weren't here, I think the concern was about the regional taxes and educational taxes, and we were trying to find some sort of resolution to the original agreement, is where this all started. Through you, Mr. Chair, is that a fair comment?
Mr. Downey?
Mr. Chair, that's exactly so. That was the genesis of of this whole process. The council directed staff to initiate a process in which no further town funds would be used in support of the dome, and so we continue to try to make that happen.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, there was other items from last term on the pending list, which I don't see here. I specifically had a notice of motion about live music strategy, and I don't see it on the pending list. I'm just wondering through you if I could get a comment on that.
Mr. Interim CEO, or?
I have no knowledge as to why something dropped off the list, so it would be either Warren or Mr. Downey.
Mr. Marr, could you speak to that?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, what item in particular are you referring to?
I believe what the notice of motion that I brought forward was the fact that there was a live music strategy and live and music funding available through the province, and that we would have a report back on the possibilities of moving forward to engage and secure some funding.
Mr. Marr?
I think it's in here.
Did I miss it?
It's Councillor Humphreys saying it's in here. If we could.
It's for strategy for the packages.
Separate.
Separate?
Yeah, but your difference. No problem. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I will look into the matter and let council know next week.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Councillor Abel, anything else?
No, that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Tom. I mean, sorry. I'll go with Councillor Tom and then Councillor Thompson.
Mine's pretty quick. I'm looking on page 10 of the report, 117 in the agenda at the bottom. There's two motions lumped together. One of them is Councillor Miraculous' motion on the pilot project for left turn restrictions at Yonge and Wellington. The other is Mayor Dawes' motion on street parking plan for the downtown core. And the reason given on the status that York Region requested to attend Aurora General Committee meeting to present on signal timing options. My question is, why is Mayor Dawes' motion lumped in with that? It's my understanding of that motion that talking about street parking on south on Yonge and not the timing options for the streetlight. So I'd just like to know why those two are lumped together.
Thank you for asking that. Mr. Simonovskis.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure why, but they can definitely be separated because they are two separate projects. So.
Yeah, that just seems logical to me. I mean, one of them. I mean, if certainly with Councilor Marax's motion, having York Region comment on it would be smart. But if we're talking about investigate the feasibility of implementing a street parking plan, that to me sounds completely different. Maybe the region would like to comment on that too, but it just doesn't seem like they'd want to comment on it for signal timing options.
I'll allow the clerk to answer that.
Thanks.
Thank you. Through Mr. Chair, I believe that's actually just a printing error. Because if you notice IES 5, I believe the line and IES 6 did not print by accident, so they are separate. And I do apologize. We should certainly make sure they're but we will make sure that the next iteration of the report correctly identifies that as IES 6.
Oh yeah, no problem at all. And I guess then my question would change then to when can we? What's the status then of the mayor's motion, and when can we expect to see that report?
Mr. Simonovskis.
Certainly through Mr. Chair, we are preparing a plan to bring forward to Council to recommend a pilot program for that section as proposed by Mayor Daw, and my hope is that we're able to proceed with something for this 2016 spring. That's the plan.
Councillor Thompson. Councillor Thompson.
Just briefly, page 3 of the report, or CAO 4, speaks to the notice of motion brought forward with communication policies. The status says partially completed. Personally, I don't think I would agree with that assessment. Just following, I guess, the commonality within the report, I think I'd prefer to say in progress. I mean, there's certainly some things that have been discussed, and there's still the workshop and other components that are still pending, and so.
You're correct, Mr.
Thank you.
Absolutely. That should stay in progress.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, I guess I'll just have one, just to go to that one on, sorry, I lost the page, on page 117, page 10 of the report, of the item, speaking to the pilot project for left turn restrictions. I'm just curious, Mr. Simonovskis, I know we've had conversations about this. The council passed going forward with a pilot project. I'm just wondering why we are here at this time, basically entering into the fall, and we're nowhere to be seen with a pilot project.
Certainly to you, Mr. Chair. We have been speaking with the region on this item a number of times, and requested that they actually come to council. That intersection is a regional intersection. It's not our intersection. And we've made our request clear to the region. And my ask to them, and I was looking for a commitment to have them either come in September or the first meeting in October to present to yourselves their strategy for accommodating that request. They've told me that they can accommodate it. It's just getting them here. So that is, I'll take responsibility for that, for their inaction of getting here. But I will continue to pursue them to have them here, hopefully in the next cycle. The issue with regards to us doing anything, of course, because it's not our intersection, we don't have any authority to do so. So all we can do is twist their arm.
So it's my understanding that we will be going forward with a pilot project at some point?
That's the plan.
Okay.
That is the plan, and I need to get that regional commitment so that they can be here present to speak to this council on the implications of those changes. So there's an understanding as to what the responsibilities are for that.
Okay, thank you. That's great. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Number 10, Councillor Peary.
I can't move the recommendation. I'll look to somebody else.
Could I get someone? Mayor Dawes, seconded by Councillor Tom. Councillor Peary, you have the floor.
Without getting into it too much, I don't necessarily like the idea of having honorary members. So anyways, with that said, I just wanted to confirm the appointment process for the other citizen member and when we can anticipate to see that in front of us.
Mr. Clerk?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. We have not advertised for this position because we did ultimately need council to confirm the change in the terms of reference in respect to the honorary members. As soon as we have council approval of that, we do have the advertisement ready to go and be published. We'll usually allow a 2-week period 2 to 3 week period for submission of applications. As soon as we've had those and as soon as we've been able to sort through them, those applications plus any currently on file applications will be presented at a future closed session GC meeting for your consideration, and as soon as possible.
Councillor Perry?
And then as follow-up, why would we reduce the number by 1, creating a situation where we have an even number of members on that committee? To me, that causes an issue because there are times that it'll end in a tie. I recognize that happens when one person doesn't attend, and it could happen here tonight with a councillor away for very real reasons. But why would we put ourselves in a position so that if everybody attends, the meeting could end or items could end in a tie vote?
Is that a question?
That's a question.
Mr. Clerk?
Thank you. Through Mr. Chair, Councillor Perry makes a very good point. Certainly, the recommendation that was before you is related exclusively to the honorary membership because that was the only real variable within the equation. However, one of the options in the report is essentially to reduce the change of the terms of reference to reduce the number of honorary members from 2 to 1. And also increase the number of regular citizen members by 1. And certainly that was one of the options that's in the report, and we'd be open to it.
Councillor Perry.
So I think from a procedural standpoint, it makes sense to keep our committees numbered oddly as opposed to evenly. So I think it would be fair to put option number 3 on as an amendment.
Is that an amendment?
Yes.
Seconded. Councillor Humphreys. Any comments or questions speaking to the amendment? To go with option 3. Comments, questions? Seeing none, okay, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Back to the main motion as amended. Comments, questions? No, call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Item number 14. Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you. I'll move as is.
Second. Mayor Daw. Councillor Humphreys, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to say, I believe this is one of the first that have come forward for the community grant. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this works out. And just a funny side note, I did call Tasha before I looked at the agenda really closely and commented about the condition of that property and that it seemed over the summer wasn't looking too great. So I'm looking forward to seeing the evolution of that property, where it's going, and some of the great partnerships we can build. So thank you so much, and looking forward to that first one take off well.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Perry?
I would just state that Mr. Mayor and myself sit on the committee reviewing, commend staff on the great work that they've done to get this up and running.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Number 15, item number 15, Councillor Humphreys. That's yours also.
Thank you. Move as is.
Second, Mayor Daw. Councillor Humphreys, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in support of moving forward with this study, and I know that previous to this meeting, our last meeting, there was some discussion around some of the confusion on the proposal of the study of 5 town facilities versus the current focus on the cultural precinct. I think it's important to have this study done at the same time and in parallel, so that depending on which strategy we go with. We have all the information at our fingertips. I don't want to sort of, depending on how things work out, I just want to make sure we have everything that we need to make the appropriate decision moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question is, in the report it basically talks about, I forget which one, it said in the conclusion section, says, with recent approval of the consultant for the cultural precinct, staff have presented this report to council to confirm that council wishes to continue with the study as 4 of the 5 facilities are contained within the cultural precinct. So I guess my question would be to Mr. Downey. In his opinion, does he believe we should move forward with this, or is the cultural precinct going to be sufficient in terms of the information?
Mr. Downey.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe you should move forward. That's my recommendation. That's why you have it before you. I just wanted to make sure that council was aware that we had 2 consultants working within the same area. When they start contacting residents for information, they may get confused as to the purpose of each consultant, and so I wanted to make sure that council was aware that there may be times where 2 consultants are working in opposite directions with regards to the end use of these particular buildings.
Councillor Tom.
Thank you. I guess I was lining myself up for that one because you did recommend, so obviously it would have been your opinion. Is it, I guess I'll rephrase, in the scope of work for the consultant on the cultural precinct, are we not looking at the uses of these buildings?
Mr. Downey.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe that will more than likely come out of some of their recommendations. They may recommend uses or potential uses for those facilities. So there may be an opportunity when both reports come in that council is going to have a few options as to how they might see these proceed. They won't necessarily be in direct conflict with one another, but they may be.
Councillor John.
Okay, I guess I just think that if we're going to have a cultural precinct and a consultant look at these, and 4 of the 5 buildings are going to be in there, then why would we spend the money twice? We could give the consultant for the cultural precinct, a scope of work to look at those 4 buildings and their uses, and then you kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I don't know why. I know this has been around before that, but to me it just seems like we're double dipping. But perhaps other members of council can comment.
Just before I go to you, Councillor Thompson, I want to ask one question, Mr. Downey. Has there ever been a time within the town's history where we have had 2 consultants working cross purposes on one specific area?
To you, Mr. Chair, I don't recall. I don't recall that, and I guess the overall arching thought with regards to the cultural precinct, or the thoughts with regards to the cultural precinct, was they were looking at the entire precinct and the thought of, and they are going to look at the option of whether those buildings remain or are repurposed. The consultant that I'm recommending this evening is only going to be looking at repurposing. It will not be an option for them to destroy the buildings.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. And just a quick follow-up. When the town built the library, was there not 2 different studies done at the same time within that area to look at whether to repurpose the old library or whether to build a whole brand new facility?
Through you, Mr. Chair, believe it or not, that was actually before my time, I know. That was the Venton report. The Venton report identified a connection between the old library and 22 Church Street. So that report was presented to council. Council then engaged the services of an additional consultant to look at an additional option. So they weren't doing it at exactly the same time. I believe that they received the Venton report, thought there may be something else they might want to look at, and engaged another consultant to look at something different.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
I believe as a whole, council has made a determination that they want to see a resolution to that area this term, that, we want to see something done one way or the other. The cultural precinct is one approach, and it is my my thought, that more than likely it'll result in a plan that calls for the demolition of those properties and the creation of a public square and different things, but that's one vision. And so I do see value in having the two different ones, because either way, I think we need to resolve this long-standing issue of what to do with those facilities. The cultural precinct provides one approach, but if that's not satisfactory at the end of the day to council, then this report then provides an alternative to what to do with those facilities. Because to me, that's the question we've been grappling with for the 5 years that I've been on council, what to do with these facilities. And so we either tear them down, and if we tear them down, then what happens, or we use them. And that's, I think, what we're trying to get to the bottom of, and whether it be through the establishment of a cultural precinct and a concept plan for that, or through this study and say, here's the best way to use these facilities, one way or another, and we'll answer that question at the end of this term. And to me, that's the justification for moving forward with the two reports. Even though they may seem in opposite directions, it will help us at the end of the day finally make that determination of what to do with those buildings.
Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Councillor Thompson said exactly what I was thinking. And also to add, in terms of trying to alleviate some of the confusion during this period of time, if we can really get a really powerful communication plan that helps explain to the residents why we're doing two separate studies and distinctly what each one is trying to do, so that when they get involved and get engaged, they go, okay, this is the big picture one, demolish, start over, and then this is the one where we're going to use what we have today and repurpose them for some great ideas as well. So two separate initiatives, and it's really a powerful communication plan to avoid some of the confusion for the residents and ourselves.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Councillor Perry.
Sorry, I walked out to go to the bathroom. I come back, and we're talking about conflicting reports. I don't see how one report conflicts with the other at all in the slightest. In my mind, they continue to run parallel to one another. We've got one report that's going to talk about, on a whole, an area that we have deemed to be culturally significant and plans for that area as a whole. In parallel to that, we've got a second report that's going to be coming out with potential uses for some of the facilities in that area. And then once both reports are in, we'll be able to merge the information that we gather in each to figure out what uses identified fall within a cultural precinct that we all agree is the right direction to go in, and the work's already been done on those buildings to see what they can accommodate. So for me, these are working in parallel to each other. They're not against each other, and I think they work very well together.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Have we done any studies or consultant reports on the cultural precinct areas, these specific facilities as well? Are there any reports from previous terms, previous councils?
Mr. Downey.
And if so, how many?
Apologize. Through you, Mr. Chair. With regards to the old library in particular, as you know, that we've done several reports since 2000 when the building became vacant, and proposed a number of different alternative uses and a number of conditional reports regarding the building. I can state that the building continues to deteriorate. We've also provided similar information with regards to the old senior center adjacent to the old library. With regards to the other three buildings, limited reports. The Victoria Hall has never really been looked at extensively as far as highest and best use. The Armory was just recently purchased, so we hadn't done an investigation with regards to that, and the Petch House was moved a couple of years ago. So those are more recent additions to this study.
Councillor Abel.
Have we ever done two reports at the same time, like of all these reports that you've listed? This will be the first time we've done two consultants to repeat this endeavor again. I think you were already asked that earlier.
Mr. Downey.
I hope I give you the same answer. This is the first time that I'm aware of two consultants working on similar buildings for what I believe is different purposes.
So then, that's something. That's a new approach. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions, Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I do see the need for and the value of having the two perspectives and two consultant reports. Ideally, the report from the first consultant that for determining the repurposing of the buildings would be done first, and that report being made known to the second consultant that's doing the cultural precinct, because I think that would be invaluable. But because there are many variables involved and time sensitivities, I don't think we have the luxury of the choice. It seems that there will likely be. I don't think both reports are going to be congruent, and there'll likely have to be a third consultant unless a third final review is going to be done by one of the two existing or the cultural precinct consultant. But it's difficult, but I think for me to support two consultants at one time, because I think there will be some level of overlap, but because I do want to end the stalemate in Library Square during this term, I think it's well worth the duplication in some regard. I don't think there's going to be much, but I don't think there's much choice in the matter given the variables mentioned. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Kim. Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just recalled, and I did want to bring it up. We had hired for the Southeast Heritage District last term, and I was part of that committee, and there was a great deal of information done in that district, which coincidentally includes the cultural precinct. So there's a lot of valuable information going forward with the evaluation of all the buildings as well in the cultural precinct. So there is also that work that was done. Although we went only just phase one of that endeavor, we did put in substantial resources in great detail of all the buildings in that cultural precinct, with some valuable heritage as well would be garnered from that. But I do understand that it's the same company that is doing the cultural precinct that we hired to do the consultants at $58,000 through you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Downey.
You, Mr. Chair, that's correct. You're part of the joint venture. So the consultants who are working on that are also going to be working on with FOTAN on as a joint venture.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Abel. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Thompson. Second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to bring this back to the motion before us, Mr. Downey, you've obviously been involved with, as we heard, Library Square for many years. You've certainly been the author of and been involved in many reports. The question was asked before that, why are we repeating this endeavor again if we have all these reports? So my question to you then is that, given the previous reports, why are you recommending that we conduct the study of the 5 town facilities?
Mr. Downey.
Through Mr. Chair, one of the reasons that I brought this item forward for capital budget and for council consideration was, I guess the old saying that if you keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results, you're a bit of a fool. So I really wanted to look at this differently. One of the, if you recall, the last effort that we put forward was a public consultation process where we actually held meetings at the old library, asked the public to come up with some ideas. We then had another meeting to narrow down those ideas. We presented options to council, and there was differences of opinion around the table. There was also the thought that perhaps this was there was not enough public engagement with regards to that process. Perhaps it was more staff-driven than it should have been, those types of things. So we're looking at trying to provide council with as transparent a process as possible. Let all parties, including town staff, have a say on what they feel should happen with regards to those particular facilities, and get a good debate going around with regards to how we see these buildings being used in the future. The other issue is we continue to receive requests from user groups. You had a presentation by the Lions Club. They would like to use a portion of the library. They're awaiting a response. Their expectation is that we are making some consideration of their delegation. We continue to get requests from the farmers market, for instance, to use the old armories as a farmers market for the winter. Those types of things we need to get in front of council to find out if that is the purpose or the long-term vision of these buildings. And so I believe a consultant has that capability. They have a different perspective. They haven't got any preconceived ideas as to what they think should happen or who should have a particular right over these particular buildings. We also have existing users within the buildings that are going to have some concerns with regards to how we move forward with these things. And council is going to have some consideration with regards to what role do they play in accommodating them or not accommodating them in any other particular facility. So those considerations need to be made as well. And I believe a consultant is going to be able to give you the best perspective with regards to that.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
Thank you. So based on what I heard, I mean, even though you're very familiar with all the reports that have gone on in the past, you still see value in moving forward, and that's why you've recommended that we engage the services of ACON and move forward. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Any other comments or questions? I'll just make a comment. I mean, a lot of times I hear around the table that we don't have enough information to make a decision, and I think, going forward with this and with the other consultant, we will have all the information possible afforded to us, and not just for us, but for the citizens and the residents of the town. They'll have as much information as possible where we can finally, after close to 20 years, make a decision on this area. So, I'm very happy to support this and move forward. So with that being said, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Okay. We are on to new business. I will start to my right with the lovely, beautiful Mayor Daw. Just thought I'd throw that out there. You know what? That yellow tie's really got me going today. Nothing? Councillor Thompson.
Just a reminder that we have two separate closed sessions ahead of us, and it's 9:45.
Yep. Councillor Abel.
We were talking about the Heritage Advisory Committee and putting out a notice, and if I may, through you, Mr. Chair, ask Councillor Humphreys about the Accessibility Advisory. We had one person you were going to check to add to that because it was identified that there was a shortcoming for members, and was that person able to come forward and volunteer?
Yes, she's been notified and able to come forward, yes.
Is that confirmed she's on the committee then?
Mr. Clerk?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, and I'm only confirming this because while the member has been identified, the formal application has not been received because we do need to require an application from them to confirm their qualifications. And as soon as we've had the application, we'll bring forward as.
And the only reason I bring this up is because it was some months ago when we moved forward. So I just thought that would have been completed by now. And if it was not filled, then I thought maybe we could use the same time to advertise for the Accessibility Advisory. Two in one. two committees.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I would suggest that actually to advertise for the AAC at this time, we could not do that. The motion, the way it was adopted, was very specific. It was to open up the membership exclusively to one individual who had previously identified themselves, and they just need to submit their application, and a reminder has gone out to them asking them to do so, and yes.
All right. So I just wanted to be sure that if that had been addressed and she had, or the person had declined, then we would still be looking for a spot. And then why wouldn't we marry the two together? It was the only point I was bringing it up. And since a lot of time has transpired, I thought that we would have had some sort of resolvement from that invitation.
Thank you, Councillor Abel. Councillor Humphreys.
Just to Councillor Abel's point, I'll make sure that the application is submitted officially and the individual has accepted and is honored to be part of the committee. So that's just to tie up loose ends. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Councillor Tom.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just the agenda, there's a notice of motion not on it. I don't recall if it's protocol for not putting notices of motion on GC.
It doesn't. The one last week?
Yeah.
It shows up, if you put it on council, it'll show up on the next council. It doesn't show up
Okay.
on the GC.
That's all. That's all I wanted to know.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp. Councillor Perry.
We've got a car show here on Saturday. I just want to make sure everybody is aware of that. I believe it's Saturday. It's an electric car show, and there now, people's eyes are lighting up. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Okay, so move to closed session. We have one item. May I have a motion to resolve the closed session following adjournment? Moved by Councillor Abel, seconded by Councillor Kim. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councillor Perry, seconded by Councillor Kim. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. We are adjourned. We're coming back out for special counsel. And so, Terry, Anna, if you guys are wanting to stay, we'll be coming back out for special counsel, so just to let you know. What? I love the mic. I know. I don't want to give it up. Do I have to give this up?
Yes, you're done.
I'm done?
You're done. It's adjourned.